Hello, patrons. Welcome,
Greetings.
everybody. It is great to see you all once again. We hope everyone is having a great December,
Yeah, greetings,
almost
boys. Greetings,
the holiday
herons.
seasons. Absolutely. So, for this Patreon episode, we wanted to talk about Hayao Miyazaki and his
Yeah,
latest
again,
film, How Do You Live? Slash The Boy and the Heron.
I
And
wonder if there will ever be a title course correction for that one because
I
that
hope
is,
so.
I
Like
mean, and
the
yeah.
live, die, repeat thing.
Oh yeah. Maybe it'll be
Yeah.
another one of those. I don't know. I mean, The Boy and the Heron's not a terrible title.
No, it's fine.
Yeah,
It
it's a
makes
fine
sense.
title. But as we talked about, How Do You Live makes a lot more sense.
I agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So if you're unaware of what Britta and I are talking, we talked about that quite a bit on our review of The Boy and the Heron
Yeah.
slash How Do You Live, because that is the Japanese title of the film.
Hmm.
And for all the reasons you'll hear when you listen to that episode, that title is incredibly apt.
Oh
I
yeah.
love that Miyazaki went for that off the heels of The Wind Rises. But the main reason we wanted to bring it up here is that over the weekend, and you may have seen this, it was the first time in the United States, in North America, that Hayao Miyazaki won the box office,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is insane. Now, this only happens because of the timing of its release, right?
I was
Because
gonna say it's kind of a double-edged sword,
it
right?
is, it
Yeah.
does come with a slight caveat, but it still happened. It's still
There's
in
an
the record
asterisk
books.
there for sure. It was somewhat of an asterisk because on one
Yeah.
hand, yes, it wasn't really competing with anything new. I mean, it kind of was the new release of that weekend in many ways,
Yeah.
but we've seen concert films, especially this year, be wildly successful thanks to one Taylor Swift. Beyonce's still a powerhouse in and of herself. So the fact that her movie didn't even overpass Hayao Miyazaki is worth talking about, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's incredible. And actually that kind of tailors a little bit to, and maybe this can be a part of this conversation, or
Hmm.
it can spin off into its own, because right behind The Boy and the Heron, so that grossed 12 million, almost $13 million at the domestic box office, which
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
obviously not a lot. That's why it comes with a little bit of a caveat,
Yeah.
because on most weekends, let's be
Yeah.
honest, that would not crack the top five.
But that's still a marketing thing, right?
But
That's something
it's
that's
still
something you can
interesting.
plug. You can plug number one at the box office.
Exactly,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's still something that Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli can, and G Kids as the distributor, they can
Yeah.
hold on to that for sure. It
Absolutely.
happened. It might not have been competing against much, but it happened.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to bring it up to say this. At number two, just behind it at 9.2 million, was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And someone else pointed this out. I can't recall where I saw this exactly on social media,
Hmm.
but the legs for that film is actually doing pretty well.
Okay.
Songbirds and Snakes is, continuing to chug along, and for that film in its fourth weekend,
Yeah, it's been a month,
something to
hasn't
that
it? It's
effect.
been a
It's
month.
been a little while for it to still be, chugging along with almost $10 million is not
It's a
bad at
good point.
all.
It's a good point.
So, that's a pace that some other, a lot of blockbusters we've seen this year have not been able to manage that. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just because of, again, the timing of everything, the fact that there wasn't much at the box office. Hey, I haven't seen the Hunger Games yet, let's go see that.
Hmm.
Or if it's just because it's a prequel to something that I'm familiar with. I
Hmm.
don't know. Whatever the reason is, that film does have some legs. So that's also an interesting tidbit to the box office weekend,
Sure.
alongside Godzilla -1 garnering 8.5 million. And I don't, I'm not sure what the budget for that film is. I'd have to look it up.
But still, an overseas film like that doing fairly well at the
Yeah,
box office here in the United States. Not just
that's the thing,
not
with
just one
no
Japanese
marketing.
film, two Japanese films in the top three.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Two in the top three there. And this was the second weekend, right, for Godzilla minus one? I
Second or
believe it
third,
was.
second or third, third,
So
yeah, third at the longest.
absolutely. So for it to be in its second or third weekend and not that far behind the Hunger Games there,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And to your point, it is a Godzilla film, but this is
Hmm.
a movie that got zero marketing here in North America.
Right.
It's mostly been spreading by word of mouth.
Hmm.
And domestically, it has $25.5 million.
Yeah. It is
Not
nicely
bad at all.
it is nicely timed though, and I don't know if this was on purpose, but there is that Godzilla television show coming, Monarch, I believe it's called.
Yeah, I think it's out already.
Yeah, it is
So
actually. It
yeah,
just goes to show how much I follow TV. I guess it is out right now.
it is.
So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there were at least some audiences that confused the two, thinking that they were somehow connected. And again, I don't know if that was the intent or not, but I'm sure that that could have been part of the narrative as to why Godzilla minus one did fairly well comparatively. But yeah, to see
Yeah,
two Japanese films in the top three just in any weekend just proves how weird the box office has been this year.
absolutely. And I did look it up. The budget for Godzilla minus one was around $15 million US dollars, that is.
Hmm.
And worldwide, I mentioned that domestically it's at 25 and worldwide it's around 52 million.
All right,
So
so that's over three times.
it's doing pretty well. And for a film that, again, at least here in North America, there's been little marketing. So
Yeah.
there's not going to be much overhead cost there. Maybe back in Japan, there's more to the marketing. Maybe that's where all the marketing budget went. I don't
Well, yeah,
know.
I think that's the thing. I don't know if who's the distributor on Godzilla minus one? Toho, I believe it is.
I think
Yeah,
so.
and
Yes,
I
yes,
don't know if
that's
I'm
right.
pronouncing that right, but maybe they timed it well, not just with that Godzilla television show, but there was also the marketing for Godzilla versus Kong, or the new version of that. That trailer came out not too
That's
long
true.
after Godzilla minus one was
It's
already
been
in
Godzilla
theaters.
heavy right now.
So there,
Yeah.
yeah, so Godzilla himself was sort of part of the narrative. So and maybe it was kind of a lucky
Yeah.
accident. It could be one of those box office flukes for all we know.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, this is a little bit of the chicken and the egg situation.
Right.
Did they release the new Godzilla versus Kong trailer at a time where they were always going to do it? Or is it off the heels of, okay, we have the Godzilla series on Apple. This Japanese Godzilla film is out in theaters now. Let's
Hmm.
use that as momentum to release this trailer. Or what
Yeah,
was that the situation?
I
I
don't
don't know.
know. I don't know, but that's another clever way to try and replicate the Barbenheimer thing, right?
Yeah, I
You
mean
take two
they're
completely
they're
disconnected things and find a way to connect them.
absolutely. They deliberately released that trailer with all of the
Yeah,
Godzilla hype right now, for sure. And
yeah,
good for them. They should
yeah,
have done
yeah.
that.
That's good marketing.
Absolutely. So and that trailer looks okay, I guess. I don't know if you have any
It
thoughts on it, but
No, no, looks like another
it looks
version
like a
of Godzilla
Godzilla
versus
versus
Kong.
Kong.
It looks like a movie that puts more time and effort into its human characters, and it doesn't know what to do with them.
Yeah, exactly. That's 100% what it looks like. But
Yeah.
hey, look, if it's fun, that's all I could ask for out of those
You
movies,
know,
I guess.
I don't want to get too off track here, but every time we see one of these movies in the quote unquote monster verse, we always say we just want more of these monsters. And every time we get one of these new movies, they give us less monsters. I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. Less monsters and more characters that we don't know or that we're
I
interested
mean,
in.
didn't they learn anything from the new Planet of the Apes trilogy, that the human characters don't matter as much? It's all about the
Mm,
apes. I mean, if
exactly.
like with those movies, those movies have a plethora of interesting characters. They just all happen to be non-human.
Yeah,
Like you can make Godzilla and Kong and Rodan, for instance, the most interesting and compelling monsters to watch on screen, and that's all we need.
absolutely. And I don't want to hear the excuse, or at least I'm not going to buy it, that because they're giant creatures who can't, they can't speak to us through dialogue or anything of that sort, then that's
Mhm.
the reason we have to have human characters to move the story along for us to connect with. I don't buy any of that because in this last Godzilla versus Kong film, the best moments were of a little girl who obviously could not speak for
Yeah.
obvious reasons, and the two creatures who were able to convey emotion simply through gestures
Oh yeah.
or the way they look at each other or the way they move. Like Kong, they did a great job, to the
Yeah.
filmmakers' credit and the animators. They did a great job of invoking, you know, not dialogue, but certainly communication
Yeah.
via the way they looked at each other, the
yeah.
way they fought.
It
You
was
know, like
emotive. It was
it
emotive.
was absolutely
They
emotive.
they went
Like
they went full white god for a moment.
absolutely, like that moment at the end between Kong and Godzilla. I think people were really excited about that moment because you get this palpable, visceral moment of respect between the two
Sure.
just by how they render them.
Yeah.
You sense it, you see it, and of course they don't have to say anything in that moment. So you can have a silent film where it's just the creatures. Now, I don't know how marketable that is, but you could, from an artistic perspective, from
Oh,
a
I mean,
storytelling
yeah, I would
perspective,
love that.
I know I would too. Like have a silent film where it's just these creatures communicating again non-verbally in a way where we understand what's going on,
Mhm. Mhm.
and have it be about the creatures. You can do that.
You
You
can
can
do that.
absolutely do that.
Don't you just love it that we opened up this Patreon content
I
talking
know.
about the box office success of Hayao Miyazaki, and now we're
And
talking
then
about
here we
Godzilla
are.
versus Kong, not even 12
I
minutes
know.
later.
I don't know how we got there, but here we are. Yes. Anyway, the whole point of this is that we're excited for Hayao Miyazaki.
In general, like, we're just excited for box office results to be a little bit different this time around, right? And
Yeah.
that's not to say we don't want, the typical kinds of movies to fail. Like, we don't want
Mhm.
movies to be quote unquote failures. We just want other types of movies to be more successful, right?
Mhm.
And we're seeing more successes that are a bit more out of the box than your traditional Disney or superhero flair, right? And I love
Yeah.
that sense of variety.
I agree. I agree. It's, anytime that Hayao Miyazaki can take the box office, regardless of circumstance, I'm absolutely there for it. I do love the irony, though, that this is his most surreal movie.
Oh
And
yeah, I
it's
mean,
the one that you probably have to watch
well,
the
yeah,
most
we
outside of Spirited Away, maybe.
and we kind of talked about that during our Ghibli movie series when we got to Spirited Away. We acknowledged that yes, this is kind of seen as the quote unquote trademark Ghibli film in some ways. Some people see it as like the most accessible one, the one you start with. And I don't agree with that. That's a weird movie. That's a
Yeah,
very weird movie.
I
And
agree.
we were seeing some similar results, I guess, domestically with regard to The Boy and the Heron.
I agree. And The Boy and the Heron, I just don't think is all that accessible
Mhm.
without context of understanding who Miyazaki is
Right.
as a filmmaker. It's very impressionistic. So much of what he's doing in that film, as we talked about in the review,
Hmm.
it's a Miyazaki buffet,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you won't pick up on that you've unless you've seen it. Our great friend Colby Mack, I
Hmm.
hope he doesn't mind that I'm invoking his name here. I'm sure he won't, because he put out on Twitter that he went to see that film and it
Yeah.
was his first Miyazaki experience.
Yeah.
And that was exactly his reaction. He's like, I didn't get it. I don't understand this at all. And
And
that's going to be the reaction for most if that's
yeah.
the case.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong because I don't want to speak for him, but he didn't dislike the movie from what I
No,
remember.
I think he just was overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
will be if that's your
Yeah.
first Miyazaki.
Credit to him for being that bold and daring to admit that this is your first movie within a
Yeah,
popular, I guess, movement of films, especially as a critic.
sure.
That's something I
Yeah.
feel like we as critics don't do enough of because we all have our blind spots.
We all
And
have
and,
them.
and
Yeah.
I have you've been guilty of maybe revealing something that you haven't seen. You kind of feel ashamed about it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I felt the same way. Sometimes I've like just not said anything just so the truth
Yeah.
didn't get out there. So
Oh, we
good
used to have a segment on the show way back when,
in session confession.
in Session Confession, which
Yeah.
was all about getting outside of our comfort zone in that regard.
Yeah. I think we deliberately turned that into a segment on what we haven't seen that we should have seen just to get
Yeah.
away from the negativity because
Yeah.
at times it would start out as okay, I have to confess, this is a popular movie and I hate it, but we kind of wanted to get away from that narrative just to avoid the negativity.
Yes.
So then it turned into Blind Spot Central. But you know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
good on Colby for at least admitting that,
I
because we all
agree.
have
Yeah.
those.
We all have them. And yeah, I agree. Kudos to him. And his reaction to it, I wholly understand. I do not
Same,
blame him at
same.
all because, because you're going to be a little overwhelmed by what that film is doing
Right,
if
right.
you don't have any sort of context to it.
Hmm.
But that is to say, that's why it's even more mesmerizing to me that this is the one that does the best at the box office,
Yeah,
or that gets to have that title anyway.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's
I think.
just so funny. But this is also a little bit of that. I guess like you could compare it to, or the way I articulated it to some friends of mine, because I went to their house over the weekend. They wanted to watch Ferrari, so we watched
Hmm.
Ferrari. But I was
Okay.
explaining to them, or we were talking about this film. I don't even know how it came up, but it did. And the way I kind of articulated it, and I think you could say the same thing about James Cameron now, because his name was brought up in this conversation as well.
Okay.
Like there are certain filmmakers that, because of what they've done in the past, they just they get carte blanche to just do what they want.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Actually, I do remember how this got started because we were talking about sports, and I ended up using art as a way to bring comparison, because there are certain football coaches in the NFL that could be on the hot seat. I think we were talking about Bill Belichick specifically,
Oh,
right?
okay. Well, yeah, this
Because
makes a lot more sense now.
yeah, so the Patriots are not very good this year. They're not going to make the playoffs. But
No,
you
what are they? What
can't
are they? 3-10 or something like that?
yeah, they're terrible. But
Yeah.
you can't fire Bill Belichick, or at
No,
least you're
no,
not going to.
you're not
The
going to
guy
do that.
brought you 6 Super Bowls. You've been to the playoffs just about every year between him and Tom Brady. You're just not going to get rid of him. He's earned the right to do whatever the hell he wants in the latter stages of his career.
Yeah.
And I kind of brought up the comparison of whether you're talking about Martin Scorsese, or maybe even more appropriately, like Robert De Niro. If Robert De Niro wants to do Bad Grandpa, let him. He's earned the right. Okay.
Yeah.
He's earned it. And Scorsese's still doing great work, so don't get me wrong, that's maybe a
Yeah.
bad example, and maybe
Yeah.
Miyazaki is as well. But that is to say, despite whatever it is Miyazaki and Scorsese want to do, doesn't matter.
The
Whatever they want to do, if they
the
want to get wholly impressionistic, and maybe it's the least attainable film of their careers, let them. They've
yeah,
earned it.
the blank check exists.
They
It
got
exists.
carte blanche to do whatever.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I kind of love that that's sort of what we're getting here with Miyazaki with
Well,
this last film.
I mean, to be fair, you talk about James Cameron being really the king of the world, and I use that term loosely because in many ways he's really more of the king of the states. Because anytime Miyazaki makes a movie, it's bonkers at the Japanese box office. He's sort of their
Mhm.
James Cameron in some ways, right?
Yeah.
So it is, and he's making movies primarily for that audience because that is his audience.
Mhm.
So the fact that he does have carte blanche to do what he wants, I'm not surprised. I'm not
Yeah.
surprised. It's just like he has a great audience here that's willing to embrace whatever he wants to do, and they're gonna love what he wants to do.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
looking at The Boy and the Heron here, now this is Box Office Mojo. For international, it doesn't expand it out further. At least the page I'm looking at
Okay.
doesn't expand out what international means exactly. It could be primarily Japanese. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the international box office gross that they have on the page for The Boy and the Heron is 84 million.
84. Right. Okay.
97 total if you include the 12 here in North America. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that is to say, in Japan, this film doing well. Who would have thought? You know? Like, I don't know how that compares to the rest of his filmography,
Well,
but
yeah. And think
that's
of it this way too. It was different here in the States because G Kids and the way they distributed it, they were probably obligated to market this film in some way here, right? But The
Mhm.
Boy and the Heron got no marketing whatsoever in Japan. It was just released. Remember that, right?
Oh yeah,
So
that's right. They
yeah,
didn't. Yeah, they didn't even give a trailer. Yeah, they just.
yeah. They just said, "Hey, your boy Miyazaki's making a new movie. It's gonna be out in a week."
Yeah. Well, and that's funny because okay, so for comparison, I did look this up,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know the context of the marketing, but for The Wind Rises, which was his last movie 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
internationally that did gross 131
Okay.
million. Now, The Boy and the Heron, when was it released in Japan though? It wasn't recently, right? It was
No,
earlier
that
in the
was a
year,
few
like in
months
the
ago. That was a
summer.
few months ago, I think.
So it's safe to say that it's not going to reach 131. I don't know if the legs are there for it to
Mm-hmm.
surpass. And so maybe that is indicative of, hey, there was no marketing. It was just a release.
Yeah.
And that, answers the gap of 131 to 84 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
That's right.
the
It was released in. I'm just looking this up. Apparently in July in
in
Japan.
July.
In
Okay.
this past July.
Yeah. The Wind Rises domestically, though, here in the States, only 5.2 million.
Okay, so there is at least a success story there, even if in totality it might not be as much of a success just yet, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Because I bring that up to say because again there was no marketing in the states for The Boy and the Heron, but I don't remember much for The Wind Rises either. Maybe
yeah.
there was a trailer. I don't know if
I
it
think
was
there was
much
about
beyond
it
that.
was well, it was probably about the same, but at the same time too, when The Wind Rises was distributed in the States, was that G Kids?
It,
I don't
it,
remember
it
if that was G Kids.
well,
That
now
could
I
have been
have to look
Disney.
that up.
There was a
That
point where
could have been Disney. Here,
yeah.
let me look that up real fast
Now
because that
I
could.
believe when The Tale of the Princess Kaguya was released in the States in 2014, that was under the G Kids label. But I could have sworn
Okay.
The Wind Rises was a Disney domestic distribution.
Let's see here. Yeah, it was Walt Disney
Gotcha. Okay.
did North America. So, but honestly, I don't think the tactics were all that different.
Yeah, looking back on it, from what I recall, I think the amount of marketing we saw for The Boy and the Heron is kind of comparable to something like The Wind Rises back
Yeah,
in the
because
day.
I think all we got was a trailer, and that's all that I've
Yeah.
seen for The Boy
A
and the
few
Heron.
trailers, maybe a few clips thrown on YouTube, but that was really about
Maybe.
it. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think
Good
it was
point.
much more beyond that. Really, the only difference I can really see is that, uh, and again, I'd have to look up this information to say more concretely.
Hmm.
But I think The Wind Rises maybe got a little bit of a smaller release initially because I think it was released in early December to
Yeah,
make the awards run for 2013.
that was another one of those cases, and this happens a lot with many Ghibli films, right? They get an earlier release in like November or December,
Yeah,
but they get their wide release from Disney in like
yeah,
February.
yeah. It's opening for The Wind Rises. The opening was only 21 theaters.
Yeah, okay.
So of course its opening was only $313,000, but that
Right.
was for the awards run in 2013.
Yeah, okay.
In session film wise, we included it for 2014
Right.
because 21 theaters. Okay, in 2013. 21. Everybody got it in 2014.
Yep, yep.
So that's why we included it with that year.
Yeah,
But, either way, that certainly is, a huge difference to 2,205 theaters for The Boy and the Heron.
yeah, yeah.
So hard. I guess in a lot of ways, it's hard to compare the domestic release because it's
Well, it's still
they
kind of soon too.
G Kids, to their credit, more so than Disney, they did give it way more exposure
They did. They did
and
that here.
earlier in the cycle at the
Yeah,
beginning of the month versus at the end.
they kind of capitalized on the word of mouth it was already getting in Japan and sort of used that to their advantage. And we're still pretty early here, right? The film technically got released here in the States on December 8th, which is just this past weekend as we're recording this. So,
Hmm.
like, this could be one of those cases where, for
It could
some
by the end of the
interesting
month.
reason, it
Yeah,
finds an audience. Could
yeah.
be another Elemental.
So this weekend is Wonka, but beyond that, there's not much. You'll have a few films trickling in and limited releases, such as American Fiction, The Zone of Interest, get
Hmm.
limited releases. But Wonka's really the only big one this weekend, which is to
Yeah.
say, The Boy and the Heron could still do something this weekend for sure.
What if it beats Wonka?
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
What if
That's
it
not
beats
gonna happen.
Wonka?
Not gonna happen. But it could end up number two, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it could end up number two. And then you get into, the weekend right before Christmas, and then obviously things open up more there because you get Aquaman. Poor Things expands that weekend. The animated film Migration, which I don't suspect will do all that well, but more competition there.
That's an Illumination film, right?
Yes, I believe so. And then the
No,
Monday of Christmas, you get The Color Purple and Ferrari coming out. So
I can see The Color Purple doing well.
yeah,
Migration, that's a question mark. Illumination, they're weird. They're weird. Like they somehow just know how to make big hits without doing a darn thing.
I know.
And when I say not doing a darn thing, they tend to make pretty mediocre films.
Yeah, but
But
they do well financially. A lot of
somehow
times.
they
Yeah.
know how to target a certain youthful demographic. Like
Yep.
whatever they're doing, they know how to do it well. Have to give them credit for that. It's not my cup of tea, but it works.
Yep. So and look, I've seen some marketing for that. Some big time
Yeah,
marketing.
yeah.
They've pushed the film a lot in theaters. I've seen the trailer God knows how many times.
Hmm.
And for Thanksgiving, they did a huge push during the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. So
Of course,
they've
on Turkey Day, it's a movie about
on Tur-
birds.
yeah. So they've been pushing this. We'll see how effective it is because, yeah, based off the trailer, it doesn't look any better or worse than any other Illumination film. It looks exactly what you would
Yeah,
expect for them.
yeah,
And I'm with you. It's not usually my cup of tea either. But I do suspect, especially because it's close to Christmas and people like going to the movies over Christmas time, I
hmm
could see that doing well. So like if the Boy and the Heron is going to do any more damage, at least here in North America, it's got to be this weekend.
hmm
Because once you get to Christmas weekend, there's just going to be too much competition,
yeah,
and I think it'll pretty much fizzle out at that point.
yeah. I think so too.
But it has potential to
Has
maybe be
potential.
number two
It does.
behind Wonka.
Yeah, which would be an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, good movie. We're going to talk about it a little bit more on the main show this week.
Yeah, we
So,
are.
foreshadowing there. And yeah, I think that's it for now. Unless you have anything else you want to add, Brendan.
Nothing else. I'm trying to clip my wings a little bit because everything we're talking about here around the Boy and the Heron, I want to pivot and use that as a springboard to talk about the Golden Globe nominations, but we need to
Yeah.
save that for the main show. Uh, but at the
Yeah.
same time, these box office results and the fact that the Boy and the Heron did fairly well as far as its recognition at the Golden Globe nominations, maybe there's a tie between the two. Maybe there is. So we'll talk about it later.
We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But yes, The Boy and the Heron, regardless of context, it still gets the claim that box office weekend. It's very exciting. Love Miyazaki. Hopefully, all of you watching this, listening to this, we hope you got a chance to see it. We hope you enjoy it.
I want to see it in a theater. I really. I'm
Yeah.
very curious about the English dub for.
I was
this
gonna
one.
say I kind of do as well, and I kind of want to see the English dub because I've heard it's amazing.
Well, I mean, people said the English dub for Spirit Away is amazing, and I don't know what they're seeing, but
That's true. But Studio Ghibli's dubs tend to be better comparatively.
weirdly, I know we're getting a little side topicked here again, but the dubs for Studio Ghibli that I tend to like the most are a lot of the ones that people tend to like the least.
Okay, fair.
Maybe not. Maybe not. That could be a very false assumption on me, because I actually really like the English dub for My Neighbor Totoro. I think having the Fanning sisters as
Yeah.
as the two sisters there, I think really works. I really like the dub for Kiki's Delivery Service. I actually think that's a very good dub there. I do not like the dub for Spirited Away, and I don't like the dub for Princess Mononoke. And I think it's primarily because for some reason those two just feel so like robotic to me. And I've made
Okay,
that
interesting.
that criticism
Yeah.
before. Like to me,
I think that was the only thing we argued about in the
I
Ghibli
think,
series.
but what? Yeah,
I like the Mononoke one.
to me, it sounds like they are talking like this. Like that's
I say I don't feel that way. I
to see
might.
with eyes unclouded by hate.
I definitely don't feel that way. But I mean, I also don't watch them in the dub enough to really have a strong opinion. But
Mhm.
I would go to bat for Mononoke. I'm with you on Spirited Away, and honestly, all the other ones, I don't think they're bad. I think they're fine at worst. Some of them, like Ponyo, I don't know if I'd have
You
to go
know,
back
that
and
one I
watch it.
don't hate either. And coincidentally, the ones I tend to like the most are the ones that are more children centric because they're not as dependent on matching the vocal rhythms with the already existing animation. There's a bit like weirdly having children center. It's a bit looser, I guess, so it kind of works in the
Gotcha.
film's favor. But when you're having adults and you have so much movement to try and match that already exists, you're kind of working backwards a little bit. I tend to sense the catch up game with those rhythms, and that's the first
Gotcha.
thing I hear. Maybe it's just the musical side of my brain that's kind of playing against
Yeah,
me or
maybe.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. At any rate, I'm interested in what Robert Pattinson is doing,
Oh, I hear he's off
and
his rocker in this
yeah,
movie.
I definitely want to hear it. So,
Mhm.
at any rate, we hope you guys enjoyed the film. Stay tuned for the episode. We're talking Globes, of course, and we're talking musicals. We're going to do
Yeah.
another draft. It's
All
going to be a lot
right.
of fun. So stay tuned for all of that. And thanks again for your guys' support. Really does mean the
Absolutely.
world to us.
Much appreciated.
And yeah, again, if there's anything you guys want us to talk about, please let us know. Hit us up.
Yes,
We would
absolutely.
love to talk about what you guys want to talk about. But yes,
Peace.
thanks for your support. Enjoy the episode.